I'm Keith Green from the American Retirement Initiative, and I want to welcome you to our Winter 2014 meeting. And we called it Retirement It's About People. I'll give you 10 seconds as to why. I was talking to Barbara Perry, who is up front, and she was looking through the proposed agenda, and she says, I think your title is really boring, and it's more about people than policy or anything. Why don't you just say it's about people? And being extremely creative person I am, I said, okay. And it was Retirement It's About People after that. We are very grateful to be here. And we want to give particular thanks to Commissioner Luis Aguilar, who has been such a steadfast advocate of investors and investor protection. I have known him for a long time. It's been a great pleasure, and he has always been very consistent in his advocacy of working for and on behalf of people who are not always represented as well as they should be, both here and in his public sector role, which he's very passionate about, and in his private sector role as well. There's a lot of information in terms of his bio that's out there that you've seen before. You know that he has a long and distinguished legal practice, both on the business side and also working in law firms as well. He recently got an honorary doctorate at Georgia Southern University, where he gave the commencement speech a few weeks or maybe several months ago. He was formerly corporate secretary of Invesco, general counsel, executive vice president. So he has a very distinguished business background, but what makes him even more unique is the combination and really the desire to serve in the public sector as well, and to really be a real advocate for folks. I am pleased and honored to have the opportunity to introduce you, and want to thank you again for welcoming us and really supporting what we're trying to do, which is educate folks, have serious discussions about how to improve access and make retirement better for all Americans. So thanks again.
Thank you.
You're welcome, guys.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks.
Thank you, Keith. Keith is right. He and I go back a long time. We probably have been to most countries in the Western Caribbean one time or another, representing the state and the city in various initiatives. I'll say one thing. I appreciate you mentioned the Georgia Southern honorary doctorate. I didn't tell you that for you to mention it. I told you that so you would call me Dr. Aguilar. Can't get any respect even from longtime friends. I'm very pleased to sponsor today's summit. Protecting our nation's seniors and retirees is an important mission for me. These obviously are some of the most vulnerable individuals in our country, and they need our attention. And for that reason, it's important that we have solutions-oriented dialogue like today's panel's promises to be. Now, before I continue, I need to do some housekeeping. One of them is just a standard disclaimer that the views I express today are my own views, not the views of the Securities and Exchange Commission, my fellow commissioners, or members of the staff. Also, because I know there's going to be something I was going to do at the end of my remarks, but I know that because of our late start, some folks are going to have to leave for other things. I do want to acknowledge them because no event gets done magically by itself. And so I need to particularly thank the SEC staff, and especially Maya Sams and Stephen Moisier from SEC University for working with Keith and me over the last long months to put this event together. And I think they may have already left the room. They were in the back. But if you're here, Maya and Steve, we thank you. No rest for the wicked. They've already moved on. I also need to thank my own Chief of Staff, Smita Ramanathan, who I know is on the phone call dealing with another issue and therefore not here. But I do want to thank my counsel, Paul Gumaga, who's actually been my front man in this matter for so many months. And he too is going to have to go, I think, to the White House to attend an event on my behalf on diversity and inclusion, and will be leaving us shortly. But there's Paul, and he's really worked hard on this. Thank you, Paul. Now, let me start by stating the obvious, that baby boomers are no longer babies. They are, in fact, now retiring boomers. Moreover, as the baby boomers enter retirement, many are retiring much sooner than expected, and quite often involuntary. Specifically, a survey sponsored by the Society of Actuaries indicated that while Americans plan to retire at a median age of 65, they are actually retiring at a median age of 58. This is a full 7 years earlier than planned. The survey showed that many factors led to retirement. Some of these factors are voluntary, but many are not. For example, many individuals felt that they were forced out of their jobs or were otherwise compelled to retire. Others retired because of corporate downsizing and or the availability of financial incentives to retire. Interestingly, research shows that those Americans facing retirement contemplated that they would find some interesting work to keep them occupied during retirement and thereby earn some extra money. Unfortunately, the data shows that this is just not the case. In reality, many retirees who anticipated work in retirement do not work in retirement and therefore do not earn any extra income. That's what the data shows. Now, I'm a big believer in data. I'm a big believer in what President John Adams once said, that facts are a stubborn thing. You'll see me using a lot of data in today's speech because you can discuss intent, you can discuss why things are why they are, but data is a hard thing to ignore. Now, I will encourage you to actually see my written document, which will be on the web a little later today. It's got, I don't know, 60 or more footnotes, heavily laden where these numbers come from. They stand the test of time. Today, we're also going to have some panels that will address some unique issues pertaining to the African American community and the Hispanic community. Although these two groups have made tremendous progress in our country, their relationship with our financial service industry can best be characterized as lacking and in need of significant attention. In 2010, for example, the Department of Labor issued a report concluding that disparities in retirement security existed for women and for racial minorities. The statistics are troubling. The report found that more than any other group, African Americans workers were out of the labor forces at ages 55 through 64, primarily because of higher rates of disability. The report also stated that older women who are alone after the age of 65 are much more likely to be poor than married women, and that women of color are much more likely to be poor than white women. Moreover, the Urban Institute noted that in 2009, 65% of white wage and salary workers were offered employer-sponsored retirement plans compared to only 56% for African American workers. Just last month, a survey by the Social Security Administration, based on the most recent data available, shows that African Americans had lower earnings than their overall population. This means that African Americans were likely to receive lower Social Security benefits at retirement because these benefits are based on a lifetime of earnings. Moreover, African Americans are less likely to be married compared to the total U.S. population, suggesting that they are less likely to qualify for Social Security spouse and survivors benefits that might otherwise assist their well-being in retirement. Similarly, a recent survey of Hispanics and their financial retirement planning shows that the annual household income of Hispanics are even lower than the African American community, and of course, lower than the general U.S. population. According to this survey, Hispanics also anticipate retiring at age 66 and continuing to work, at least part-time during retirement, which, as noted earlier, is a bit too optimistic. The survey also indicates that more than 50% of Hispanics surveyed had a poor understanding of retirement plans that were offered at their workplace. Moreover, the data shows that only 38% of Hispanic workers even had access to employer-sponsored retirement plans, and of those 38%, only 71% actually contributed to the plans. Obviously, these surveys have important implications for those that are planning for retirement. Among other things, it means that they have a shorter period of time to accumulate wealth for retirement. And the longer retirement period also means that they will need to be better prepared to address threats to retirement's nest eggs, such as inflation, healthcare costs, and long-term care. In addition, as I'll discuss shortly, they will need to be even more vigilant. See, Keith, see what you've done to me? I've lost my ability to speak English. In addition, they will need to be more vigilant in protecting their assets from fraudsters, from those who prey on and target seniors and retirees. Now, today's panels will explore many of these issues. For the remainder of my time, I want to spend my time highlighting two issues. First, some serious issues related to elderly financial abuse, and second, some regulatory initiatives designed to protect the financial futures of senior retirees. The issue of elderly financial abuse is real, too real. A recent survey showed that 84% of experts specializing in investment fraud and financial exploitation of American senior citizens agree that the problem of fraud targeting the elderly is getting worse. Nearly all those experts said that elderly Americans are vulnerable to financial swindles and that the problem of investment fraud against seniors is serious. Indeed, it has been estimated that about 1 in 5 Americans aged 65 or older, that's about 7.3 million senior citizens, already have been victimized by financial fraud. Given these statistics, it is imperative for regulators such as the SEC to work even harder to protect those vulnerable seniors. We need to enforce the laws that reduce the opportunities for fraud. Demographically, seniors will soon be the largest percentage of the American population. Experts have been forecasting this for some time as the baby boomer generation ages and retires. What has not been emphasized as clearly is the tremendous generation inequality of wealth between some seniors and everyone else. The good news is that in the aggregate, today's senior population has been successful in accumulating assets. As noted by a former director of fraud and education outreach for the California Department of Corporations, aging baby boomers have accumulated substantial assets, either through inheritance, home equity, or a lifetime saving for retirement. The bad news is that these aging baby boomers are ripe for abuse. This disparity between seniors and everyone else, including their own children, exponentially increases the vulnerability of seniors to financial exploitation. To make matters worse, according to a survey of state securities regulators, financial planners, healthcare professionals, law enforcement officials, and other experts, basically anyone who has got any involvement in this area were surveyed. And according to that survey, the top financial exploiters of older Americans include family members and caregivers. It's not a pretty picture when those closest to you cannot be trusted. The SEC's own enforcement efforts show a continuing trend of fraudulent activities aimed at senior citizens and the elderly. I'm just going to mention a few examples from only this past year to give you an idea of the kind of fraud that's taken place. In March 2013, the SEC shut down a $3 million Ponzi scheme that targeted seniors, including an elderly investor suffering from a stroke and suffering from dementia. The scheme falsely promised high profits from commercial and residential rental properties, and of course, the money went elsewhere. In August 2013, the SEC filed an administrative action against an individual for targeting senior citizens on Medicaid and selling them over $1.8 million in promissory notes that purportedly guaranteed a high return, and you know where that money went. In November 2013, the SEC charged an individual for defrauding elderly and retiree investors into making purported safe investments in government bonds. Instead, he misappropriated about $2.8 million of the funds to pay his mortgage and to make commission payments to his salespeople. And I'm just choosing on 3 that I thought would be of interest. There's a lot more we can point to. In addition to these 3, the SEC has been quite active. We've issued guidance last year to warn the public about other types of frauds targeting senior, including oil and gas scams, prime bank fraud scams, and scams promising high returns or promising risk-free investments. Now, regrettably, there will always be those who prey on the vulnerable and seek to exploit them. This is the reason why we need to have strong regulatory framework. That's the reason why we need to have a strong regulatory framework in place that limits the opportunity to fraud and deception. To that end, I would like to discuss some actions that the SEC is taking to safeguard retirement assets, including strengthening our examination program, partnering with other regulators, and sponsoring events like today's that are designed to address issues of importance to seniors and retirees. One recent example involves the SEC's National Examination Program put together by OC. If anybody's from OC here, we'll give you a shout out, Office of Compliance, Inspection, and Examinations. OC just last month published its 2014 examination priorities, and in these priorities made it issues pertaining to seniors an important focus. We publicize these priorities in order to inform investors and registrants about areas that are perceived to be of high risks. We developed these priorities based on, among other things, communication with our fellow regulators, as well as comments and tips received during the year from investors, as well as information provided to us by SEC-registered entities. Now, I would like to point out two initiatives that are particularly important to seniors and retirees. First, an initiative that focuses on retirement vehicles and rollovers, and secondly, an initiative in the broker-dealer exam program that focuses on sale practices and supervision. First, the SEC has taken a closer look at what happens when during changes in employment or when entering retirement, investors have several options for what to do with their retirement assets that are held by their employer. In particular, the SEC will focus on the practice of financial advisors in making recommendations on rollovers of individual retirement accounts or IRAs. Indeed, a FINRA regulatory notice has recognized the conflict of interest between a broker-dealer's financial incentive to recommend that plan assets be rolled over to an IRA, in which case a broker-dealer earns a commission, and a recommendation that the investor leave her plan assets with her former employer or roll over the assets to a plan sponsored by a new employer, in which case there would be little or no compensation for the broker-dealer. A financial advisor affiliated with a broker-dealer clearly has an economic incentive to encourage an investor to roll over plans into an IRA managed by their affiliate or by their broker-dealer. This issue is important because, among other reasons, about 98% of IRAs with a balance of $20,000 or less are held in brokerage accounts, 98%. And the largest source of contributions to IRAs are rollovers from employer-sponsored retirement plans. Simply stated, there are a lot of commission dollars that can influence the advice that is given. Given this inherent conflict of interest, the SEC plans to review the practices and incentives of investment advisors and broker-dealers in making recommendations on these rollover IRAs. In particular, the SEC will examine the sale practice of investment advisors that are targeting retirement age workers to roll over their employer-sponsored 401k plans into higher cost investments. The SEC will also examine broker-dealers and investment advisors for possible improper behavior or misleading marketing and advertising in making recommendations on rollovers of IRAs. Second, as part of its exam priorities of 2014 and our continuing effort to protect retail investors, especially elderly investors, the SEC will focus on broker-dealer supervision of registered representatives with significant disciplinary histories. Last year, a Wall Street Journal article reported that from 2005 to 2012, more than 5,000 brokers licensed to sell securities had once worked for a firm that had been expelled, thrown out, kicked out by FINRA. Notwithstanding that their former firms had been expelled, these brokers remained in the industry. Often these brokers go from one problematic broker-dealer to another. This pattern of brokers moving from one broker-dealer to another is sometimes called, wonderful name, very descriptive and right on, maybe too generous actually, but the pattern of moving from one broker-dealer to another is sometimes called cockroaching. As cockroaches scurry from one place to the other. Now, during my tenure as a commissioner, I have seen a multitude of enforcement cases involving recidivist brokers. They're like the bad pennies. They're always showing up. I've been here 5.5 years, and I've had some cases where the same people have been before me at least 3 or 4 times. Incredible. In fact, this issue is of serious concern that the Commission has discussed with the SEC staff the need to address this problem. And I am glad to report some positive movement. Just last month, FINRA reported the formation of an enforcement team that will be dedicated to reviewing brokers whose records show a pattern of complaints relating to sale practices. I expect that the staff of the SEC and FINRA will work closely to address the problem of service broker. Although I welcome the task force that was announced last year, in my mind, that should have been part of FINRA's mandate from the first day FINRA was formed under the 1939 amendment to the 1934 Exchange Act. But better late than never, as the expression goes. We need to address this issue. We need to address this issue robustly so that we can restore, so we can prevent investor harm if possible, and restore investor confidence in our markets. Notwithstanding the SEC's and FINRA's actions, it is important that seniors and retirees be vigilant because they are, in fact, the first line of defense of protecting their own assets. As a result of that, events such as today and other education, I think, is key to making sure that seniors and retirees can fend for themselves. Nonetheless, there is a role for regulatory oversight, and that cannot be understated. As one survey shows, most seniors do not have all the information they need to pick a financial advisor to help protect their retirement assets. And about 3 in 5 experts say that seniors are not able to determine, and I quote, the legitimacy, value, and authenticity of credentials held by their financial advisors and planners. Close quote. For this and other reasons, the SEC and other regulators must continue to play an important role in securing the financial future of American retirees and working proactively to protect their retirement assets. Now, as I near the end of my remarks, I would like to say a few words about the need to report elder financial abuse. Unfortunately, recent studies have shown that only a small fraction of elder financial abuse is reported. Senior citizens are attractive targets for financial exploitation by fraudsters because they generally have significant assets or significant equity in their homes. In addition, they are particularly vulnerable because of isolation, cognitive decline, physical disability, and health problems. One survey showed that 1 in 5 doctors and nurses often deal with older victims of investment fraud. And 92% of these doctors and nurses think that even mild cognitive impairment often makes seniors more vulnerable to investment fraud. Given this information, it is important to encourage the prompt reporting of suspected financial exploitation of the elderly to appropriate authorities in order to trigger intervention, prevent financial loss, and provide other necessary assistance. Unfortunately, many financial institutions hesitate to report suspected elder financial abuse if it entails disclosing non-public personal information about their customers. Their hesitation comes from a concern that this information cannot be shared with others due to the limitations on sharing such information under the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. The law, however, was never meant to shield fraudulent activities targeting older adults. To make that clear, the SEC and other regulators issued guidance last year confirming that it is entirely lawful for financial institutions to use customer information for purposes of reporting suspected financial abuse of older adults to local, state, or federal agencies. The guidance also provides information on potential signs of elder financial abuse, such as erratic or unusual banking transactions. The hope is that by encouraging prompt reporting of elder financial abuse, seniors and retirees can get the assistance they need when they need it. I encourage you, if you've not seen it, to see the release by multiple agencies. There's a link to it in my remarks, which will be included in the web later this afternoon. Now, I'm going to conclude my remarks by reaffirming my commitment to protect our seniors and retirees. It's an important priority for me personally and for the agency. My door is open to anyone who wishes to discuss these issues and wishes to discuss better ways for the SEC to address this problem that's growing exponentially in our country as the baby boomers become retiring boomers. Lastly, much like no event gets put together, no panel is anything if the chairs remain vacant. So I want to take a moment to thank the panelists both from outside and inside the SEC for being with us today. I thank you for taking your time to bring with us your expertise and your knowledge and your insights. I expect that today's discussion will be informative, and I encourage the audience to participate. That we will get the most out of today's panels. And I want to conclusion, I want to thank you for having me here today. Have a great, great, great event.